went by that way. At that time, Tesha experienced her core's awakening. She has now turned 9, and Arthur is about to reach a new phase in his training. But suddenly, he emits a lot of mana, setting off an explosion and ending up unconscious. So he then had to explain to Virion that it was a dragon who gave him his will, learning thereby that dragons are uncommon beasts, and the most powerful ones. But that wasn't the only news that he received. In 4 months, he'll be able to go home, and if that wasn't enough, the object belonging to Sylvia that he had left behind breaks. Carefully, Arthur gets close in order to see what has happened. Suddenly, a small eye is seen through a gap in the egg. Arthur never imagined that it was an egg. After breaking entirely, a small dark dragon comes out and bites Arthur. But instead of being left with a bite, a small symbol appears. Suddenly, he starts to hear a voice inside his head. It's the small dragon. Still confused about what is happening, he decides to call her Sylvie in her mother's memory. Arthur falls into a deep sleep. Suddenly, a shout wakes him up. It's Tesha. While they go to continue their training, the old Virion is left startled. He then tells him that beings like Sylvie only hatch in front of their family members, and he warns him that when he returns home, he must keep her safe. Then, they continue on to the final stage of their training. These tamers are able to use a beast's unique mana skills. This has 2 stages. The first stage, the acquisition stage, is that in which a wizard is able to use the beast's strength. But the second stage is that in which a wizard is able to use the beast's true skill. Virion, after years of training, was able to unblock the Shadow Panther's second stage. In that way, he proceeds to give him a display of his power, showing incredible speed while fully concealing his presence, and showing a brutal thirst for blood. Days went by that way, and with Virion's help, he was able to attain the first phase. He also taught him how to conceal his bestial presence from other wizards. In that way, the days went by, enjoying their final days in Manhwa until the day of their departure arrived. Tesha couldn't hide her tears, and she received a special present from the former king. In that way, along with a small group of elves, they arrived at the floating city of Xyrus. Arthur is before a large door. For 3 long years, he lived through many adventures. He lost many companions that he never imagined he would find, and he will finally be able to see his parents again. When they open the door, a maid greets him, and behind her, a small girl, suddenly a woman, approaches him. It's his mother. Suddenly, his father appears from behind, and they all blend into a great embrace. He then tells them about everything he lived. He gives them a vague explanation of how he survived the fall, and the reason why he had to stay at Manhwa, all without mentioning the great dragon, and telling them that the small animal that he has next to him is a simple mana beast. Feeling a little bad about that, he then greets the little girl, Eleanor, his sister. Time may pass, but people don't change. His father boasts in front of him that he is reaching a new phase in his mana circle. But he's left stunned when Arthur tells him that he's very close to catching up to him, so he challenges him to a duel to see how much he has advanced. At that point, the house's owners, who are his parents' friends, also arrive, Vincent and Tabhida. With them is their daughter, Lilia. They all go out to the garden. There, both of them get ready. The first attacks were meant to test each other without using magic, although his father admits that he took him by surprise. But from now on, he will get serious about it. His father, who did not have a good training, took years to get where he is now and be finally able to turn his mana to fire, developing thereby explosive fists. On the other hand, Arthur had many advantages from the time he was born into this new world. This culminated in his total control of all 4 elements, mastering some up to their deviation level. Arthur uses lightning magic, and he starts to attack at an amazing speed, which is impossible to match for his father. Both land a blow, which creates an explosion, but his father manages to catch up with him. But just as it all began, it all ended immediately. And as may have been expected, everyone was left stunned by the young 8-year-old boy's skills. Vincent is still in disbelief at what he has just seen, but he tries to persuade Reynolds to enroll Arthur in the Xyrus Academy. He will love to pay for his studies. However, Arthur, in a serious manner, asks them to let him spend more time with his family before deciding if he wants to go. The following day, they go shopping. On the way, he finds out that the Helstia family owns the most important auction house of the city, and his father has become its head of security, but he also was given a small change. However, not all is peace and quiet. There are eyes observing them. Only the most talented wizards can attend the Xyrus Academy. Great scholars, royal leaders, and militaries come out of this institution. It's unmatched by any other magic academy on the continent, and Headmaster Goodsky is at its head. Thanks to Vincent's connections with the academy, he persuaded the headmaster to evaluate Arthur personally, without mentioning his abilities to her. So they go out to the house's garden, where they start the test. While he was entering with Virion, his previous world's martial arts were manifested as elements in this new world. They only had to adapt a little bit. Arthur throws some loops at Goodsky, but she uses wind magic to return his own attack, so Arthur heads towards her using wind magic. But when he thinks he has crossed her defense, he is expelled violently. When he stops and he starts to do another attack, Goodsky creates some small tornadoes. She is impressed when she sees that Arthur goes through all of them. But the test doesn't end. After a warning, she triggers some sound magic to leave him unconscious, but that doesn't happen, after which she considers the test finished. But surprises do not end for Goodsky. When she realizes that Arthur has an affinity with all 4 elements, she loses her balance a little bit, and she says that he could be the strongest wizard in the future. But something unsettles Arthur, and she notices, so she creates a small field where nobody can enter and no sound can leave. Arthur tells her that he showed her his abilities because he wants something from her. He wants her to protect his family until he has the power to do so. Goodsky is left a little impressed, since not even the very king would be able to make a deal with her. But the time for that hasn't arrived yet. Arthur first wants to become an adventurer, although his mother doesn't agree and his father tries to take her side. Anything that he says is in vain. Arthur tries to persuade them by telling them that he could go with a companion. After emotions have calmed down, Reynolds tells him that in 2 months, the twin horns will come visit, so he'll be able to start his journey with one of them. Later that same day, Arthur goes to Vincent's office, and he asks him for some items to be able to go on his journey in exchange for helping his daughter Lilia with her Mana's awakening. Vincent and his wife aren't wizards, and Vincent hopes that his daughter may be able to become one, although the chances are very low. As was to be expected, not everyone took it well, since there isn't such a thing as speeding a wizard's awakening. Despite everything, he wants to try it. After explaining to them for a while what he did as a child, they proceed with it, although the awakening won't happen soon, and it can take years. In that way, Arthur spends his time training and then helping the girls. 2 months go by that way until the twin horns arrive. Everyone felt remorse about not being able to do anything to prevent him from falling, and they thought he was dead. But now everyone is ready since something important is about to happen. It is the Helstia auction house's anniversary, where there are highly valuable objects. The twin horns have come for that reason, to help with security. Arriving, Arthur is fascinated. Not even in his past life did he see something similar. But that's not the only surprise he'll have that day. King Blaine Glainer of Sapin and his entire family arrive there, since they are business associates with Vincent. The king is interested in Sylvie, but he's not the only one. Someone who is accompanying the king asks Arthur excitedly to teach him more about the small mana beast that he has, but the king stops them. The great auction starts. In it, great valuable items of great power are seen, even some class A mana beast cores. The king himself bids on some objects. Vincent tells Arthur that if anything interests him, he can ask for it. After a while, Arthur notices Sylvie's absence, and he starts to search for her. But the royal family's wizard is about to catch her. Arthur manages to get her to escape, but at that moment, the man threatens him, telling him that Sylvie will be his. Arthur lets a great pressure and a brutal thirst for blood out, which leaves everyone startled, leaving the royal wizard on the floor. But fortunately, no one knows who did it. Coincidentally, they captured a thief who is blamed for it. But everything is far from finished. The wizard whispers something to the king, who calls Arthur's father to tell him that he wants to be given Arthur's mana beast in order to gift it to his personal wizard. Far from accepting the king's order, Reynold avoids the order by saying that neither he nor his wife have anything to do with his son's link, since he got it on his own. The king looks towards Arthur, who looks at him menacingly. He proposes a deal. If he gives him his beast, he will let him choose a sword from his armory. But Arthur declines the offer politely. Far from done, the king offers him an exchange. The mana beast that he just bought in exchange for Sylvie, but Arthur, in a serious manner, rejects the offer again. The king, without patience, asks him a direct question. But Arthur replies with a different question, which leaves everyone stunned. The royal guards attack Arthur, but he beats them with a single blow. The royal wizard tries to cast a spell very close to him. Arthur activates a technique that allows him to split from the flow of time, and he enters the Beast Will's first phase. With a murderous and menacing look, he throws an attack that breaks one of his legs. He tries to ask for help, but nobody can hear him. But everything ended too fast. The king, who was able to see Arthur's first attack, is in disbelief. Then, Lilia's screaming invades the scene. Everyone is left in shock when they see the royal wizard's state, while Arthur is on the floor. 8 hours went by before he woke up. A representative of the king's is waiting for him. He offered him some gold coins for them to forget what happened. He then receives an explanation. The soldiers themselves interrupted the wizard's attack, which made his leg break. In that way, the incident never took place. On the next day, they decide who will accompany Arthur on his adventurer journey. It will be Jasmine. Only one thing is left to do, find a proper sword for him. Thus, they head again to the auction house, where the Helstia were waiting for him. After spending hours looking for something suitable for him, his hopes were lost. But Sylvie finds something, a sword that it was impossible for her to unsheathe. She tried all sorts of magic, but it was impossible for her. Suddenly, she got an idea, so she went into the first beast tamer phase, and she finally unsheathed the sword. On the next day, it is Arthur's birthday. There is time to laugh and cry. They have a good time, and it will be the last one for a long while. When he became king in his past life, he was alone. He lost his family, and he had to fight alone in that world. But now he has a family, and he must become stronger for them to be able to protect them. He then receives some gifts that will be of great use to him in the future, until the day of his departure arrives. It was hard for everyone to let him go. He spent 3 months with them, and that doesn't make up for the 3 years that he was away. But despite everything, they wish him luck in his new adventure. Together with Jasmine, they arrive at the Adventurers Guild, and she sponsors him so that he only has to do the final test. Once inside, they meet with the institution's head. But for some reason, his presence bothers Jasmine, and even more when he mentions her family. Arthur introduces himself as Note. Since this is his new adventure, he doesn't want them to know his true identity. On the testing ground, the examiners determine the new adventurer's classifications through short duels. Here, 2 fellows draw Arthur's attention: Elijah, who didn't have to do the test, and was classified as a Class B adventurer, and Lucas, who had an arrogant attitude. Even after ending the test, he tried to attack the examiner, but he was stopped, being placed in the B class. Now it's Arthur's turn, but when they are about to start, they are stopped by Caspian, who is an AA adventurer. He will examine Arthur personally. Caspian wasn't showing any openings or any bloodthirst pressure. For some reason, Arthur was excited. They start with some very fast attacks. Soon, Arthur realizes that he's at a disadvantage in his first real fight only with swords. He's much smaller than when he had his first fight in his previous world, and his muscles aren't well developed enough to fight a veteran with his mana-reinforced body. Caspian decides to get serious, and he triggers his wind magic and starts to shoot wind bullets. Arthur felt how his body told him to go out running, but after getting used to his attacks, he decides to get close and counter-attack with fire magic. The battle becomes more intense each time, and it has stopped being a test. Soon, Caspian starts feeling nervous, and he starts intensifying his attacks. He creates a wind gust, increasing his bullet's speed. But Arthur doesn't lag behind. When Caspian thought he was going to lose, he unleashes a lot of mana and wind gusts, but when Arthur was getting ready to use his other skills, Caspian decides to stop. He tells him that he understands why he didn't show all his skills. He wants a low classification to go unnoticed. They give him a B class. As was to be expected, everyone is stunned by what has happened, but more so Caspian, who is frustrated. But the most stunned are the examiners, who don't know why there are so many adventurers with high scores. Caspian then reveals that the king lifted the ban that was preventing dwarves and elves from becoming adventurers, and the reason is that the continent is entering a new age. On the other hand, we see how Tesha observes Arthur with an orb, and she's jealous about his approach to Lilia. But her grandfather comes in to deliver some news. She'll be able to attend the Xyrus Academy with Arthur, due to negotiations between the 3 kingdoms to integrate a new generation of wizards into the Xyrus Academy. But that's something we'll get back to later on. Arthur, after receiving his adventurer's license, heads towards the beast clearing for his first mission. There, Sylvie must go her own way, so they decide to part for some time to develop their skills. While they were resting, Arthur asks Jasmine why she decided to become an adventurer. She tells him that she decided to flee from her family. The Flamesworth family has created many of the most powerful wizards with a fire affinity on the continent, since fire is the most powerful element. But she was considered inferior for having a wind affinity. This reminded Arthur how in his past life, his Kai was lower than normal. Jasmine then confesses that when she's talking to him, she doesn't feel that she's talking to a child. The next day, Jasmine tells him that she took him there to be able to train him. After his combat with Caspian, she saw his flaws. His movements are precise in his head, but his body doesn't answer him. Arthur, since he arrived in that new world, realized that his body wouldn't react to his sword skills, his greatest virtue, and that is because his body is too small. While he was fighting with Jasmine, he confirmed his flaws. Since he discovered magic, he has depended too much on it, sidelining his sword skills. Therefore, he stops using magic for 2 years to recover his swordsmanship level. 2 years later, there are rumors among adventurers about a small swordsman who cleared a dungeon by himself and who ascended to class adventurer using only his sword. But for others, it's hard to believe, or they are all false stories to them. Suddenly, the bar's door is opened, and Arthur comes in. A large-sized adventurer approaches him to challenge him, but he simply ignores him. Suddenly, he attacks him from behind, but Arthur is intact. Thinking that he missed, he starts a series of attacks, but none touch him. Then, a cry of despair is heard. Arthur cuts his fingers and exerts pressure on the place, filling everyone present with fear. He then leaves, reinforcing the rumors about the masked swordsman. 2 years went by after that since Arthur started his adventurer phase. During that time, he spent time in many dungeons and he improved his swordsmanship. But Lilia also had her mana awakening. She would regularly return home, but she's about to go on her last mission before starting her lessons at the Xyrus Academy. She joins a group of adventurers in which we may see some familiar faces. Arthur is not happy at all about seeing Lucas again, but he is a little happy about seeing Elijah. They are all led by Brauld, a Class AA adventurer. They enter the dungeon. Inside, they spend some minutes walking without finding any beasts, but a sound makes them look up. They are attacked by batrunners. While they are defending themselves, Brauld orders them to conserve their energy and not use magic. But as was to be expected, the only one who didn't listen was Lucas, who creates a fire typhoon that eliminates all the beasts. Brauld was upset due to Lucas' disobedience, since he knows how dangerous that dungeon can become the deeper they go in. They reach a place with many gaps, but without time to think, a giant worm appears in front of them. Creo creates some water barrier, but the beast disappears in an instant. Oliver, a wizard who is with them, wants to keep going by himself to impress one of the girls. But Arthur notes something. He quickly orders Lucas to create a fire barrier. But when he's about to save Oliver, a large explosion entirely engulfs him.